are the special sensations? Special sensations including vision, hearing, taste, smell. These are special sensations. So for afferent jobs, there are two kinds of jobs. General sensation and the special sensations. That's easy to understand. Special sensations particularly are carried out by these special cranial nerves, such as the optic nerve, the olfactory nerve, right, the vestibular, cochlear, so that's easy. General sensation is carried out in the majority by 5, by Gemini. That's a general sensation, meaning just the pain, touch, temperature. The majority is by 5, but there are small areas that are carried out by 9 and 10 as well. But 9 and 10 really doesn't carry too much of the general sensation job. They are like the external auditory canal here. There are some 9 and 10 sharing there. About the tympanic membrane, there are 3 nerves anyway. And the posterior portion of the pharynx down there on the epiglottis, there are some sharing there. But 9 and 10 share only a small portion of the general sensation. Okay? The general sensation is nearly from 5, so we'll talk about that. So that's efferent job, 2 kinds, general sensation and special sensation. Efferent jobs going out, how many jobs are there? Of course, there's a motor moving all the muscles, okay? Moving the facial muscles, moving the muscles of the tongue, and also the pharynx and larynx, all the stuff. That's a muscular movement, that one type of efferent. There's another type of efferent going on. That is to drive the glands. On the face, you have glands. How many glands do you have? You have the lacrimal gland here, you have a parotid gland here, you have submandibular gland here, you have sublingual glands there. So you have 4 pairs of major glands. In addition, you also have glands on your nasal cavity and oral cavity. Those don't form distinct glandular tissue, but there are scattered small glandular cells line up the nasal and oral cavity, still carry out the glandular function. Okay? So that's the gland secretion. And we know that all the glands on the face, they are all innervated by the motor portion of the parasympathetic nerves. Okay? Parasympathetics control the gland secretion. They're all innervated by the parasympathetic, including all these 4 major pairs of glands and also some scattered glands in the nasal cavity and oral cavity. Okay? And remember this is all parasympathetic. If it is a parasympathetic, we know that you've got to have a preganglionic neuron and postganglionic neuron. Preganglionic neuron in the central nervous system, postganglionic neuron in the peripheral nervous system, and the preganglionic neuron is long, postganglionic fibers short, etc., etc. Okay? So all the glands on the face are innervated by facial nerve, except parotid. Okay, so remember that. That's all except, there are a lot of all excepts in that. All the glands on your face are innervated by the facial nerve, including the lacrimal gland, except the parotid gland, which is by 9 by the glossopharyngeal. Okay? So they're all parasympathetic, they're all innervated by facial, except the parotid, but that's also parasympathetic, but it's by glossopharyngeal. Okay? All right, so output jobs, 2 kinds, muscles and glands, right? In addition, but those glands are parasympathetic. What about sympathetic to the head and neck? You've got to have sympathetic innervation to the head and neck. Also, you've got to have sympathetic to your pupils, right? Sympathetic fibers dilate the pupil, parasympathetic constrict the pupil, right? So you got to have sympathetic pupil here. Where does the sympathetic come from? The sympathetic fibers come from T1 through L1. It's only here in the spinal cord. There's no sympathetic center in the brain and the brainstem everywhere. It's only in the spinal cord here. So the sympathetic preganglionic fibers arise from the lateral horn of the spinal cord between T1 and L2, and they come out of the spinal cord and they form this sympathetic trunk, right? Sympathetic chain going up and down. Now some of the fibers going up really beyond the T1 and goes all the way up, and along the neck to form the cervical sympathetic ganglion. Okay? You usually have 3 pairs. You have the inferior, middle, and superior cervical sympathetic ganglion. They're along the sympathetic chain going up here, and they all come from the thoracic region. but the fiber goes all the way up until they get to the superior cervical sympathetic ganglion there, and then the postganglionic fibers is going to leave the ganglion and hitchhike with blood vessels. The sympathetic nerves don't perform a specific nerve. They hitchhike, tangle with the blood vessels and go into anywhere they need to go. Okay, that's the sympathetic. That's also head and neck. So with that in mind, so the jobs in mind, let's go over the 12 cranial nerves, right? So some of them are pure sensation, right? Like 1, 2, 8, they're pure sensation, just after, okay? They're special sensations. And some of them are pure motor, okay? Such as 4, 6, 11, 12. 11, there's a little bit of other components, but just think about 4, 6, 11, 12. They're pure output muscular movement, simple, okay? So that's 3 plus 4. 3 pure sensation, 4 pure motor. That's 7 gone. So the left are 5 of them. Those 5 are the troubled ones. Okay? So there are 3, 5, 7, 9, 10. Okay? 3, 5, 7, 9, 10. Those are mixed nerves, so we need to pay attention to them. So for those simple ones, we don't need to worry too much, right? You know where they go, where they exit, what do they carry out the job, so that's easy to review. So let's focus on the 5 mixed nerves, 3, 5, 7, 8, 7, 9, 10, okay? Starting from 3. 3 is relatively simple. 3 is a motor nerve, right? It's an efferent nerve. It controls all the extraocular eye muscles moving the eyeball around. All the 7 muscles around the eyeball, including the levator, pupillary superior orbits, all the 7 muscles. That's all by 5 of them by 3. That's the 1 by 4, 1 by 6. And so that's the 3. It's basically a motor nerve for muscles. In addition, 3 contains a parasympathetic component. And the parasympathetic component controls the constriction of your pupil, controls the constrictors of the iris. Okay? If it is a parasympathetic, you've got to have a ganglion somewhere, right? Because a parasympathetic has to be a ganglion. The ganglion is the ciliary ganglion that's located just on top of the optic nerve over there. We can't see it in the anatomy lab, but you know it's there. Okay? So from the preganglionic fibers, you leave the brainstem and travel all the way along with the optic nerve, and get into the orbit. Then synapse as a ciliary ganglion, and the postganglionic fibers are called short ciliary nerves, and they go to the eyeball. That's into the eyeball, control the constrictors, right? That's parasympathetic. So that's 3. 3 is motor plus parasympathetic for pupil constriction. Okay? And the ciliary ganglion is for that. So 3 is easy. 5. Then 5 is trigeminal. It's basically all general sensations. Okay? Now it's complicated here. We see 5 here because it's a sensation. If it is for the spinal nerve, the sensation all come out. The primary sensory neurons are located in the dorsal root ganglion, right? That's general sensation. For the trigeminal nerve, the sensory neuron is located right here, underneath the dura mater. It's called the macrosteral cave. That's where the trigeminal nerve ganglion is located. Okay? That's where the primary sensory neurons are located. They're underneath the dura mater, just next to all these foramina. So that's a macrosteral cave. That's trigeminal. Trigeminal has 3 branches: the ophthalmic branch, maxillary branch, and mandibular branch. And they exit the cranial cavity in the middle cranial fossa through 3 openings, right? Ophthalmic is the first one, exit through the superior ocular fissure. The second one, maxillary, exit through the foramen rotundum. The third one, mandibular, exit through foramen olanum. Okay? Now, for the first one, exit through the superior ocular fissure. You can see through the superior ocular fissure, it gets into the orbit, right? Once it gets into the orbit, it forms the frontal nerve, nasal ciliary nerve that we see, all those nerves. Those are the nerves from the ophthalmic branch of the trigeminal. Okay? and it travels all the way up here and actually exits through the supraorbital fissure or foramen, supraorbital notch or foramen actually then form the nerves on your forehead. Okay? So if you pinch on your forehead, that's the first branch of trigeminal, responsible for all the general sensation in this area, temperature, touch, pain here. Okay? That's the first branch. Second branch is a little complicated. Second branch is maxillary. It exits through the foramen rotundum. But if you look at the foramen rotundum here, foramen rotundum is not a hole. Oh, that's critical. We want to save this one for facial nerve. So foramen rotundum is not a hole going this way. It is a hole going anterior, posterior. Okay? So this is my skull. Foramen rotundum, if you take an X-ray this way, you're going to see foramen rotundum. If you take an X-ray from above, below, you're not going to see foramen rotundum. So foramen rotundum is a hole going anterior, posterior. Now, when a maxillary branch of the trigeminal exits through foramen rotundum, it gets, see, here's foramen rotundum. It's exiting through the foramen rotundum, and it's ending up in this area. I'm going to show you. Where is that? Swell. I'm going to use this side. Okay. Now, when the exit through the foramen rotundum, it's getting to this little gap here. You see my swell is inside that gap. This little gap right here. This little gap right here. See that little gap over here? This little gap. Okay, that's where the foramen rotundum is going to exit to. So if I push my straw here, you see my straw moving within that little gap there?
No.
Oh, well, here,
Right.
here. See?
Right there.
See something moving
okay.
there?
Yeah.
Okay. That little space right there, that little gap space right there is called pterygopalatine fossa. Pterygo refers to this bony structure. See this two bony structures down there? It's the pterygoid plate of the sphenoid bone. The sphenoid bone is like a pterodactyl, right? With wings like this and two legs down. And those are pterygoid processes. So these processes are pterygoid process of the sphenoid bone. Okay? And these bones, if you look at the heart palate, the heart palate is formed by two bones. The anterior 2/3 is by the maxillary. The posterior 1/3 is by the palatine bone. Okay, there's a little suture there. I don't know if you can look at your skull. You can see that little suture there. So the heart palate is actually formed by two bones. The posterior portion is the palatine bone. So this space is actually located in between the pterygoid process of the sphenoid bone and the palatine bone. That's why it's called pterygopalatine fossa. Okay, so if you have a hard time to remember it, then just remember it's a pterygoid process in the palatine bone, right in between this little gap here. That's pterygopalatine fossa. That fossa is where the maxillary nerve, through the foramen rotundum, if you just exit foramen rotundum, you're going to end up in that fossa. Okay? That fossa is a funnel-shaped area, okay? Larger on the, above and smaller down, a pterygopalatine fossa. Now, when the maxillary nerve branch of trigeminal exits through the foramen rotundum, you end up in the pterygopalatine fossa. There, it's going to go three directions. It's going to go X, Y, and Z, three directions. Okay? X is going anterior from the pterygopalatine fossa over here. If it goes anterior, it goes back into the orbit through the inferior orbital fissure. Okay? So if you look into the orbit, remember I said you have a V-shaped gap there. The upper leg is superior orbital fissure, the lower leg is the inferior orbital fissure. So from pterygopalatine fossa, if the nerve goes anterior, it enters the orbit again through the inferior orbital fissure. Okay? Then it's going to travel. See this little gap here? It's going to travel through the floor of the orbit, then exit through this hole here. That's the infraorbital foramen or infraorbital notch right over here. That's the X branch. The maxillary branch of the trigeminal, you go X, Y, and Z. So X is going anterior through the infraorbital fissure, gets into the orbit, and exits through the infraorbital foramen, and innervates all the skin sensations here above your mouth in this area. Okay, that's X branch. Y branch is going inward. Okay? So you have a pterygopalatine fossa on each side. If the nerve goes inward, there's a hole allow it to go through. That hole, can you see my straw moving here? Okay, if it goes inward, of course it gets into the nasal cavity, right? The pterygopalatine fossa is just lateral to the nasal cavity. It goes through the hole. There are two holes. There's a hole this way. Okay? You only can see it sideways. That hole is called the sphenopalatine foramen. Okay? Sphenopalatine foramen. So that hole allows the nerve to go Y in direction into the nasal cavity. And you have two nasal cavities. So one on each side. When it gets into the nasal cavity, some of the nerve will branch out running on this side of the wall. Some of the nerve runs along the nasal septum. Okay? So that's the Y branch of the maxillary branch. Gets in the nasal cavity and still for the general sensation. Okay? All the nerves in the nasal cavity come from that branch. Okay? X, Y. And Z is going down. From pterygopalatine fossa, it goes down, it's through the greater palatine foramen, the lesser palatine foramen. See all this? And if I push my straw, goes through the greater palatine foramen, you see my straw ends up in the pterygopalatine fossa. Okay? Now, I should have asked you to bring your straw with you, so you can actually poke on these, so you can check on them. Yeah. So this is from pterygopalatine fossa going down through the greater and lesser palatine foramen. When it goes down, it goes into the oral cavity. It goes to the ceiling of the oral cavity. It's going to then line up on the ceiling of the oral cavity. The greater palatine nerve innervate the hard palate. The lesser palatine nerve innervate the soft palate. That's on the ceiling of the oral cavity. Okay, so that's the trigeminal nerve second branch, exiting through foramen rotundum, end up in the pterygopalatine fossa, and going X, Y, Z, three directions. And it goes to the face, the nose, and the roof of the oral cavity. Okay. The third branch is the mandibular branch, exits through the foramen rotundum. That we actually have dissected out quite a bit. And after the exit through the foramen rotundum over here, it splits into three nerves. Okay? Foramen ovale. After the mandibular branch exits the foramen ovale, it splits into three branches. One is the inferior alveolar nerve, enters the mandibular foramen over here, and travels inside the mandible, and end up exiting at the mental foramen over here. Okay, that's inferior alveolar. Okay. Now the inferior alveolar nerve also carries a small branch that travels not inside the mandibular foramen. That's nerve to the mylohyoid nerve. That nerve travels along this groove here. See this groove? There is a groove on each side. That mylohyoid nerve doesn't enter here. It goes along this groove and goes to the mylohyoid. Okay, that's the inferior alveolar. The lingual nerve, of course, goes to the tongue and control the anterior 2/3 of the tongue's general sensation. Okay? And the third branch is called auriculotemporal. Auriculotemporal is the nerve that swings around after exiting through foramen ovale, swings around toward the ear and carries some fibers to the parotid gland. Okay? But that's the third branch, mandibular branch of trigeminal. So those are the three branches of trigeminal. Okay? But they don't travel alone. They have some hitchhikers that hitchhike with them. Okay? Now, what are the hitchhikers? Now, first for the let's talk about the cranial nerve. Then we'll mention about hitchhikers. Okay? 7 hitchhike with 5 in a lot of places. Okay? So that's 5, right? 3 branches and exiting points and where they go, all this stuff. So 7. Okay? 7 is the most complicated in terms of capacity. Okay? First, it enters the internal acoustic meatus over here. Okay? 7 and 8 both enter here, but 8 is going to end up inside the bone. So all your ear apparatus is inside the petrous portion of the temporal bone over here. But 7 enters here, then it's going to go through 3 exiting points. Okay? Now, how does 7 go through the bone here? Here is the model I made for you. Okay. This point is where the seventh facial nerve enters the internal acoustic meatus. Okay? And you have to imagine with this is all inside the bone. When it enters into the internal acoustic meatus, it's going to go forward a little bit, then make a turn to the back. Okay? Right at the turn, it's going to send out a branch, this black one. Okay? This turn is called the genial. It's called the genial, okay? Because it's like the knee. Okay? It's called the genial. Now there is a ganglion here, it's called the genicular ganglion, located right at this turn. This branch that's sent out is called the greater petrosal nerve. Okay? Where does it go? This little branch, the greater petrosal nerve, is going to exit through here. There's a little gap here. See this gap? On the petrous portion of the temporal bone, there is a little gap here. This is called the hiatus. The hiatus for the greater petrosal nerve. See that little gap here? See that little gap there? There, I'm pointing out. And if you look at the gap, there is a little groove continue from the gap, traveling all the way down toward foraminal-cerebrum. Okay? That's the greater petrosal nerve. It's going to exit through the hiatus of the greater petrosal nerve right here, and it's going to go along the groove and travel toward the foraminal-cerebrum and get into the foraminal-cerebrum. That's a greater petrosal nerve. Now, when greater petrosal nerve gets into the foraminal-cerebrum, it's not going to go through because the foraminal-cerebrum is not a hole going through. Okay? When it travels through the foraminal-cerebrum about halfway down, there's a hole from the foraminal-cerebrum going anterior. That's the pterygoid canal. The pterygoid canal. Now, how do you see that? With an articulated skull, it's not possible to see the pterygoid canal because the pterygoid canal is a little channel embedded within this portion of the bone, okay? Traveling from the foraminal-cerebrum and going out into the pterygopalatine fossa. Okay? But my skull is broken to the point that I can actually see the pterygoid canal. Okay. Now, if your skull is not so broken, you have these nasal bones inside, it's going to block your view to see the pterygoid canal. Mine is broken up, so I can see the pterygoid canal from the nasal cavity. Okay? Now, I have pushed my straw through the pterygoid canal, passed by the pterygopalatine fossa into the foraminal-cerebrum. See my straw? See my straw here? See my straw here? You can pass this around. And the tip of the straw is at this foraminal-cerebrum. And if you look through the pterygopalatine fossa, that's where the straw is passing through. And if you look at the front, that's the pterygoid canal. Okay? So the greater petrosal nerve is going to travel along the groove to the foraminal-cerebrum and come down, then travel through the pterygoid canal and ends up in the pterygopalatine fossa. Okay? If you go through the foraminal rotundum, you end up in the pterygopalatine fossa. If you travel through the pterygoid canal, you end up in the pterygopalatine fossa as well. From the pterygopalatine fossa there, the greater petrosal nerve is going to hitchhike with blood vessels and going upward through the inferior orbital fissure gets to the lacrimal gland. From the lacrimal nerve. Okay? So the greater petrosal nerve is the parasympathetic portion of the facial nerve that travels to the lacrimal gland. It's really a long stretch for it to go. Okay? So that's the greater petrosal nerve. Parasympathetic, and it gets to the lacrimal gland. That's to control your tears. Okay? Greater petrosal nerve travel through the pterygoid canal. Now, travel together with the greater petrosal nerve that's parasympathetic, right? Because for the lacrimal glands are parasympathetic. There is a sympathetic fiber travel together with the greater petrosal nerve. Also to the eye, and that's called the deep petrosal nerve. Deep petrosal nerve. Where does that sympathetic component come from? The sympathetic component comes from the sympathetic fibers that hitchhike with the internal parotid artery. Okay? We'll talk about the internal parotid artery later. Okay? So that's the first branch. That's the first branch over here. So again, I'm looking at the right side, the facial nerve going here, make the first turn, send out the great petrosal nerve going through all these pathways into the lacrimal gland. Okay. Now, then the facial nerve turn back a little bit, then turn down. Okay. This all happens inside the bone. Okay. When it turns down here, it will go straight down and toward the stylomastoid foramen, where it exits, then branches out and innervates all the muscles of facial expression. So this point right here is the stylomastoid foramen. Okay? But when the facial nerve comes down all the way, halfway somewhere there, it sends out another branch going anteriorly through the middle ear and exit a little bit anterior to that. This is the chorda tympani branch of the facial nerve. This one, the chorda tympani branch. Okay? So this is all inside the bone. You only look at the exiting point, exiting point, exiting point. This is all pathway inside the bone. Okay? So you understand how facial nerve travels inside the petrous portion. Now, if we turn over the skull, you look at down here, this is the mastoid process, styloid process broken away. This is the stylomastoid foramen on one side. This is stylomastoid foramen on the other side, right? That's where the muscular branch of the facial nerve exit and for the muscles of facial expression. But the chorda tympani, this little one here, exit anterior to that, right here. See that little gap there? That's called the petrotympanic fissure. Petrotympanic fissure, right next to the joint. Here's a TMJ joint. There, that little gap over there. That's where the chorda tympani is going to exit. That's called a petrotympanic fissure. Okay. Petrotympanic fissure, right here. Okay. Posterior to the TMJ joint. On this side is here somewhere, right here. Petrotympanic fissure. So chorda tympani exits through the petrotympanic fissure there, and then it's going to hitchhike to the lingual nerve. Okay. Then, so chorda tympani exits through petrotympanic fissure, hitchhike on the lingual nerve, and travel to the tongue. It's responsible for two things. One is for the anterior 2/3 tongue's taste. That's afferent. Secondly, it carries parasympathetic efferent fibers to control the submandibular gland and sublingual gland secretion. Okay, that's chorda tympani. So if you cut chorda tympani, you can lose your anterior 2/3 of the tongue's sensation. You also lose the glandular function of the submandibular and sublingual gland. Okay. So all these branches of facial nerve, this greater petrosal nerve hitchhike with somebody gets the lacrimal gland, this chorda tympani hitchhike with the lingual nerve, that's 5, and to the mandibular, submandibular, sublingual glands, and also the face. So that's facial nerve. Facial nerve. Number 7. 9 is glossopharyngeal. 9 exits through the jugular foramen, this big one over here. Okay. Then it's going to innervate muscles and also some other functions. But 9 has another branch that goes back into the petrous portion of the bone. Okay. 9 has a small branch. Right at the point of exiting, it turns back and travels inside the petrous portion of the bone. And when it travels inside the petrous portion of the bone, it travels through the middle ear a little bit, and it's going to exit at another gap here. If you pay attention, I'm going to sometimes it's not so clear, right here. Now I've pointed to you the hiatus for the greater petrosal nerve, right? If you go lateral to that, there's another small gap over here. That's the hiatus for the lesser petrosal nerve. Okay? Lesser petrosal nerve is from 9. It's from 9, it's over here. This is the gap for the hiatus for the greater petrosal nerve. This is the hiatus for the lesser petrosal nerve. Okay? So they're just next to each other, but the lesser petrosal nerve is more lateral. Okay? They all exit from the lesser petrosal nerve, if you look at it, is going to travel along its way toward foramen ovale. Greater petrosal nerve exit here, travels toward foramen lacerum, and lesser petrosal nerve exit through here is going to travel toward foramen ovale. Okay? The lesser petrosal nerve is going to exit through foramen ovale, okay? But just after it exits through foramen ovale, it's going to synapse with a parasympathetic ganglion that's called otic ganglion. Okay? Then the postganglionic fibers of the otic ganglion goes to the parotid gland. So the lesser petrosal nerve, lateral to the greater petrosal nerve, is from 9, and it exits from the foramen ovale, and immediately the synapse at the otic ganglion